Hey folks, we're up here in New Hampshire today and we're going to be talking about choosing your first handgun. What you'll see on the table here is a number of different handguns, and I want to talk about the process that I recommend using if you're in the market to buy a firearm, and particularly if you're buying a handgun for the first time. Many times people have an interest and they think, oh well, I'm going to have a handgun, I'm just going to go out and buy something. They pick it up in the gun store and the person at the gun store says, yeah, this is the right handgun for you, it's the right caliber, it's the right size, right shape, whatever. I would like to recommend that you take a slightly different approach. The first thing that you have to do when choosing any kind of a tool is really to define what your purpose is, how and why and when you're going to use that tool for what purpose. So to start with, what I tell my students is I have a conversation and I say, why and how are you going to use that particular firearm? Many times people will go out and they'll get a carry permit and they'll decide that they want the smallest handgun they can get. And so they'll choose something like, a Car PM9, or perhaps a 38 Special, the Bodyguard. Both are very good handguns. However, the smaller the handgun that you have, the more difficult it is to shoot, particularly because you're dealing with basic physics and you have much smaller mass. You're still sending a projectile downrange. And therefore, if you don't have good fundamentals of marksmanship, stance, sight alignment, sight picture, you're going to have a very difficult time learning that gun and feeling comfortable with it. So what I recommend folks do is, if they can afford to, I actually recommend that they start with a 22, either an autoloader or a 22 revolver. The reason for that is, you can learn fundamentals with a relatively inexpensive handgun. This is the Taurus, and this Taurus I think was about $200, maybe $250. It's a 9-shot 22 revolver, shoots 22 long rifle. And the advantage of this gun is it allows you to master the fundamentals with a relatively inexpensive ammunition, and an ammunition that is very low recoiling. So you can focus on things like, how do I manage a double action trigger? How do I manage that? How do I manage the single action trigger? How do I, deal with that? How do I get hits on target? Because ultimately, from a use standpoint, hits on target are what counts. The other option would be something like this Ruger 2245, and the nice thing about this gun right here, this gun again was about $250 used, and it has the same grip angle as the 1911 45. So it feels very good in the hand, it's a natural pointer, and it's easy to get hits on target as you learn how to manipulate the handgun, whether it's the safety release right up here, or whether it's the slide release, the bolt release down here, ejecting the magazine. All those skills that are important to use learn with an autoloader can be learned inexpensively on a 22. The next thing that I recommend, if you've been able to purchase a 22, you start there. The next thing I recommend is going with a full-size handgun. Now many people say, well yeah, but ultimately I want to have a small handgun, a carry gun, and I think that's great. But if you learn to run, this is an M&P 9mm full-size handgun, if you learn to run this gun, and you can do it effectively and efficiently, again, the larger the gun, the easier it is to manipulate. So whether it's working your slide, whether it's presenting the weapon out, getting good hits on target, longer sight radius, all those things are very important before moving to a compact. So, some people say, well, why wouldn't I just go right to the compact? Again, if you have good fundamentals and you understand how to run the gun and how to do it effectively and efficiently, there's nothing wrong with going to a compact. Some of the challenges that you'll have with a compact firearm are its shorter sight radius. Generally, it's a little more difficult. The springs often are a little tighter on a smaller framed pistol. And just the fact that there will be, because of its size, there's going to be more felt recoil until such a time as you really know how to run this. And what I'm saying by that is, how do you manage that recoil? What's your stance? What's your position? What's your sight alignment and sight picture? So, nothing wrong with that, but when you're starting out, I do recommend going with a full-size handgun. The next part of that, of course, is getting training. So I recommend, buying a firearm and then going out and really shooting it with a qualified trainer. And what I mean by that is shooting 500 to 1,000 rounds under a very logical, systematic process. From a revolver standpoint, again, sometimes people go out and they think, just get me a nice small little snubby. This is the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard. It's rated for 38+P. It has an integral laser on it. Polymer gun, very lightweight, a very nice carry gun. The downside about this is if you're shooting a lot, there's a bit more felt recoil than you would get with a full-size, this is the Smith & Wesson 686, than you'd get with a full-size steel gun. As I mentioned before, with the autoloaders, the other advantage here is that if you learn to run a full-size gun, everything is easier. It's larger. It allows you to manipulate it from a reload standpoint, easier to get hits on target, easier to learn the trigger, and again, there's not as much felt recoil, so as you move to a smaller gun, you'll have the fundamentals in place to do it. If you're really hung up on going small, 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 then one option might be to do something like this Ruger SP101, which is sort of in between the two guns that we've just looked at. It's a 5-shot, .357 revolver. It's a great gun for learning a smaller handgun, and going from this, a good heavy steel gun, to a polymer gun allows this larger steel frame gun to absorb more of the recoil. So if you're shooting quite a bit, let's say you're taking a class where you're firing 500 rounds, having that heavy steel gun is going to be easier for you to shoot with less fatigue. Let's take a look at the venerable 1911. This is a Kimber Gold Match, and one thing about the 1911 for me and for many people, it's just a natural pointing pistol. It's just a really wonderful handgun. Now, the question is, would this gun be a great first gun? Again, I would say it depends. It might be, but the cost of ammunition associated with the full-size 1911 45 ACP is fairly significant. So you're going to have to deal with the cost of that ammunition and dealing with recoil management. Now, I think the 45 is a relative, especially in a big steel gun, is quite easy to control. But if you're a new shooter and you might have a tendency to flinch or be intimidated by that, having a full-size steel gun in 45 ACP, great gun to have and maybe to move your way up to, but I would really recommend starting with something smaller. There are 9mm pistols that are made with a 1911 frame. That might be an option, or to start with something like a Smith & Wesson or a Glock or an XD9 or something and migrate up to a 45. Finally, the last consideration that I do is that if you start with, let us say, a full-size M&P, and you've thought out a little bit, the M&P has a compact. So you're learning the full-size gun and you're learning how to manipulate it. When you transition to a compact, everything's the same with the fact that it's a little bit smaller. The other advantage is, if you can get them in today's current environment, a 17-round magazine that comes with the M&P 9 will also work in the 9C. So you've got a little bit of redundancy, and let's say you have a few mags for the full size for the 9 M&P, Those mags will also be able to be used with the 9C. Same thing with a Glock 19, right? We have our Glock 19. This to me is maybe sort of the best all-around or a great all-around consideration for its shape and size. It's small enough that it can be concealed, but it's a great gun to learn on, and it still has enough of the full-size attributes to allow you to gain confidence and the skills quickly. The nice thing about the Glock series of 9mm, just like the Smith & Wesson, is that the 15-round Glock magazine will fit in the Glock 26. So again, if you're thinking through what gun do you buy, maybe you start with a full size, or ideally I'd recommend that you start with a full size and then migrate to smaller of the same type of firearm in the same family with the same brand, so then you have some redundancy of magazines, and it makes purchasing magazines that much less of a problem. So hopefully this has provided a good baseline for choosing that first handgun. As we talked about before, we want to define why and how we're going to use it, when we're going to use it, and really go through the process of thinking through how do I gain the skills, knowledge, and experience to be able to deploy that firearm effectively. I do recommend starting with a 22. 22s are relatively inexpensive. So you're talking $250 there, inexpensive ammunition, and then migrating up to a larger caliber gun. So yes, you're investing $250 more than just going out and buying a $450, $500 handgun. However, this is giving you the fundamentals inexpensively to train a lot. And again, right now 9mm is 14, 15 bucks a box. In bulk, maybe you're going to get it for 260 bucks for 1,000 rounds, versus 1,000 rounds of 22, closer to $50. You can practice a lot more with the 22 than the 9 and transition to the 9. The other thing you could do with a 22 potentially is you can buy a 22 conversion kit, an upper for say the Glock or for the 1911, and that's a great way to go. So you can really work on developing those skills on the same gun. Or you can buy a 22 version of the gun. Smith & Wesson has one. It's not the same parts, and from my standpoint, it's not what I would prefer to go with, but that's also a great way to go. So in summary, a lot of different things to think about when you're purchasing your first handgun, and hopefully you'll take some time, do the analysis, and really figure out a logical, systematic way to approach your firearms. Don't go just buy what the sales guy is trying to convince you to buy. Think about it, get with a good training system, go out and purchase the training and spend the time learning the firearm. And as you're doing that, then develop the skills, the confidence, so that as you move up to a larger caliber or perhaps a full-size gun, you'll have more success with that. I want to thank you all very much for watching. If you like this video, in the bottom left corner of this video, there's a little thumbs up arrow. Please click that thumbs up arrow. Tell your friends about it, and as always, stay safe.